Happy New Year, fellow wealth hackers. My name is Erwin Cito, and this is the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. One of the nice things about the holidays has been the time and space to talk to Cherry about my wife, for those who don't know, to talk about our future vacation plans for the summer, winter, future summers, retirement, and of course, investments, more for the short term, as in like how we're investing like within the next few months. This year has been a good one for us, hence our record donation to the Hamilton Basket Brigade. And we still have some cash left over to contribute to retirement savings plans, RSPs. I'm splitting mine roughly 50-50, half to invest in a land development in Northeast Greater Toronto area, which is projecting triple-digit returns in just over 5 years. Minimum investment is $25,000 Canadian. I'm stating this because this is the most common question I get on this. This is the same investment opportunity I mentioned 2 weeks ago, and it has since become available. Feel free to email us at iwin@infinitywealth.ca if you're interested in investing as well. If you can't email us, feel free to reach out to me or DM me on one of our my social media platforms. We'll get back to you. We here at iWin, we receive an allocation as in a share of each project in order to offer to our clients because these developers like working with our referrals. Also, and then the benefit for people who invest using our allocation is they treat you better than a stranger they meet off the street. Also, as an added bonus, anyone who invests in any of these projects is invited to the friends and family access to any of these pre-construction deals. I mention this because a few of our clients, including James Moneybags Mags, MBM, who's in Costa Rica right now, at his lovely house, 300 meters from the ocean. Everything comes up Moneybags Mags. Anyways, he also took advantage. He took advantage because he's invested in past development projects. So he got access to pre-construction Liberty condo access in Liberty Village. He bought himself a rental property there in Liberty Village, which is the west side of downtown Toronto. He bought one there. He got a discount from it. And he also got to pick his unit and pay for his unit before any realtors were able to buy or bring clients as well. And of course, you're all investors. I'm an investor. I know how we all love discounts. So this is not something you want to miss out on. The other half of my RSPs will go towards my stock hacking account. I'll hold some as cash, just waiting for opportunities to arise. And I'll add to my crypto positions. So that means specifically companies that are invested or mining cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. Of course, folks, none of this is considered advice. This could be some of the worst financial advice you'll ever receive. Anyways, a friend of mine asked me last night why I don't just buy and hold cryptos, specifically Bitcoin. We both are big fans of crypto, hold a percentage of our assets in crypto. He asked me why don't I just buy and hold, like, for example, buy and hold Bitcoin. My response was, I buy and hold real estate because it's not volatile. It doesn't jump up and down in price. But when it is, it tends to be going up. So I'm happy to hold it. Whereas things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they go up, but they also go down in very wild swings. Like 10% in a week is not uncommon. Could you imagine that in real estate? I don't know if I'd be in real estate if that was like that. Anyways, so by stock hacking, I get paid on these wild movements. I get paid a premium, and I like getting paid. And I can only do so on companies that have stock that are related to cryptocurrency. Anyways, if that doesn't make complete sense, that's totally okay. All learning is a journey, and I do offer free training on stock hacking, which can be applied to blue chip companies like Disney, Apple, Walmart, or magic internet money companies like Bitcoin. Again, not advice, people. If you're interested, www.stockHackerAcademy.ca is the link. Just click on the free demo button in the top right, or you can tell your friends to do this if anyone who would like some extra cash flow in their lives. On to this week's show with Kornel Szrejber. Financial freedom or independence or security or whatever your goals are, there are many ways to get there. I personally think having a home paid off and preferably more properties paid off, at least one other investment property, having a paid off investment property would be life-changing for many. For those who live around the Toronto area or around the Vancouver area, That would mean your net worth is probably around $2 million. That's pretty significant. Yes, having 10 paid off investment properties or more would be even more so, but not everyone's that ambitious. There's actually a friend of mine who's a pretty successful mortgage agent who focuses on investors. So pretty much all his clients are investors. I asked him, like, how many clients have more than 10 properties? And I think he said less than 1%. So yes, if you own 10 or more properties, you are a distinct minority. Anyways, some are good with living frugal lifestyles. That's totally cool. Two people who I met when I started in this real estate journey, I met two who I considered financially free. And this was before the real estate boom. So they weren't free because of all the equity gains. They were actually free off from the cash flow. One owned a couple of Brock student rental properties, and the other owned 2 triplexes in Toronto. She actually lived in one of them. One drove a really old Mazda. The other didn't even own a car. Again, these are frugal people, and they didn't have day jobs. So not bad. Today we have Kornel, who has found freedom mainly through buying boring, buy and hold, exchange traded funds, ETFs for short. So these are like all the rage, probably the last 5 years or so, for people who want to buy and sell stock, but really boring couch potato style investing. Again, folks, this is not advice. These instruments, ETFs, they trade like stocks, and they track the movement of an index or a sector or a commodity, or even funds that are managed by professionals. But like many of you, Kornel couldn't stay retired for very long, as he actually purchased a conference called the Canadian Financial Summit, and he made it a success. Not an easy feat in my experience, but it helps when one hosts a successful podcast like Kornel does. $1.2 million, $1.2 million downloads to be specific. And the show is called Build Wealth Canada. And it's available anywhere one listens to podcasts. On his show, Kornel focuses more on interviewing finance experts for their best practices, tips, and tricks in the financial planning purposes. And again, to follow Kornel, you can go to his podcast. His website for his podcast is buildwealthcanada.ca, and his conference can be found at canadianfinancialsummit.com. Please enjoy the show. Hi, Kornel. What's keeping you busy these days?
Hey, good to see you. Just running the podcast, the Build Wealth Canada podcast, and I run the Canadian Financial Summit once a year in October. So yeah, just been busy running those, and then I've got 2 kids also keeping me busy, and trying not to gain too much weight during all this COVID business. So so those keep me pretty busy.
Yeah, I'm failing at the weight thing.
It's an eternal struggle.
I've taken to just skipping one meal a day. Folks, this is not advice. I think let's start there, folks. None of this should be considered advice.
You got 2 like investor guys here, you and me. And
yeah.
Let's start off talking about health.
Well, also on the investment side, none of this should be considered advice.
That's right.
The last episode I recorded yesterday, we were all drinking. So like, okay, please don't consider any of this advice. We have been drinking. But yeah, we're not licensed professionals to give advice. We're just speaking from experience and our own experiences and our own opinions. We're here to help. I'd love to see everyone successful at the end of the day. So no haters, please. I've disabled my my reviews on my iTunes. So Kornel, actually, that's such a cool name. Fun useless fact of the day. I always forget the name of Kornel University because it comes up in my conversations with people, because I know you don't do crypto, but when people ask me about like where should I start learning about crypto, I often tell them, hey, there's a book called The Bitcoin Standard. The author, his name is Saifedean Ammous, and he's a PhD from economics from, I forget which college or university. It's Cornell. I always tell them, what's that Ivy League school that's in Ithaca, New York? Like, I always forget Cornell. Now I think I'll forever remember Cornell. And like, you're so lucky to have that name, because now everyone instantly thinks you're smart.
That's true. I get to piggyback on the Kornel branding, even though it's completely unrelated.
That's so cool. Yeah, I know it's a different spelling, but still, I think it works.
Like close enough. At least there's a positive association with that name. Even though that's my first name, it's not my last name. There's definitely a lot of Kornels with the last name Kornel, but I'm yeah, for me, it's first name's Kornel, last name Szrejber. So yeah.
Yeah. Like even if you named your kid Einstein and you spelled it differently.
Oh yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's still a positive association, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
So like, yeah, you run your own conference. So I run I run a conference too. I know how hard that is. Are you nuts?
I have partners that help me with it now. So I ran it myself in 2020 with some help. Like
In
I
the
have an
pandemic.
assistant, and I had yeah. So it was just like me, my assistant, and then one of the partners was helping on the back end and stuff. But yeah, it was a lot for kind of one person doing the bulk of it. So now when I ran it last year in 2021, I did it with my two other partners plus an assistant. So yeah, it's a lot more manageable. It's definitely not something I would like for all these sort of solopreneurs out there. I definitely don't recommend like, hey, start a conference, because it's it's very easy to burn out, to say the least. Even with an assistant, even with someone managing the IT side, like what I had, for sure.
Right. And then both iterations were virtual.
That's right. Yeah. So the conference is called the Canadian Financial Summit. If anybody wants, it runs every year in October. So if anybody wants free tickets, you can go to there's a special link I made to get free tickets. So it's buildwealthcanada.ca/summit. So SUMMIT. So Build Wealth Canada is basically my podcast name and my own like personal site. So, but if you go to that link, you can actually just go there and you'll be able to get free tickets that way. So so it's great. It's basically like personal finance, investing, best practices, lots of interviews with financial planners, investing experts. We have some real estate on there as well. It's just a very, very educational thing. We're really trying to encourage financial literacy. It's every year. So you sort of hear a lot of things you kind of hear in the news, and you may pique your interest, but then you sort of want to say, okay, what should I actually know about this? Let's go a little bit deeper. So we've got interviews and different presentations, like PowerPoint slides and all that, a whole mix. We've got a live Q&A session that I started as well. A really, really good education resource for investors and just financial literacy in general. And it's specifically for Canadians, which is a big thing to mention as well. So it's all relevant to you as a Canadian.
As your name is Kornel, I think you should come up with a high school course on financial literacy.
Yeah. That would be fun. That's maybe something cool. I'll do a bit later. Yeah.
If you need a hand with that, let's get this thing off the ground. So how was it? Okay. So your first conference, who did you have as your speakers?
We had quite a few. So we had Rob Carrick from the Globe and Mail.
Big fan of Rob Carrick and the Globe and Mail.
Yeah, he does some great stuff. We had Peter Hudson, who's been known as he's been called the Warren Buffett of Canada by the Globe and Mail. So he used to run one of Canada's largest. It was either one of or the largest Canadian hedge fund back in the day. So we had him answering questions about portfolios and investing in individual stocks, that kind of thing, and pretty much all the major bloggers out there, both bloggers and just experts in the field. So yeah, we had like Rob Engen, we had Mark Seed, we had Cal Prevost. So yeah, a lot, like anybody, basically, if you just Google and then you go to sort of the top personal finance sites in Canada, where there's personal finance investing, basically someone was there from almost every single one, sort of sharing what they learned and sharing best practices and what they found in their research. So it's been very, very educational for people. It's been great. And it's fun for me because I get to pick their brains and then we share it with the rest of Canada. So yeah, we had over 20,000 people this past year. So yeah, it's a very, very, it's all digital, right? So everybody from across Canada joins it. It's a very fulfilling endeavor because it's just nice to sort of be that positive force in enhancing financial literacy in Canada. And it's great. So there's no like crazy speculative stuff on there and, get rich quick. That's not it at all. It's very much what people like the buy and hold kind of investing, sort of like, get rich slowly sort of thing. Right. And best practices and what's the smart way of doing it. Not so much, none of that like hypey, oh yeah, you make this money overnight and nothing like that. So it's a very good fit personally because that's how I invest as well. And it's always fun to pick the brains of other really smart people and then apply it to my own portfolio, but also share it with the rest of Canada. So it's been great. Awesome. It got me out of, because I was fully retired and that got me out of full retirement. So now I'm back to semi-retired. But it's been great. It's a lot more fulfilling than just being fully retired.
Can you share the age that you retired at?
So it was 32 is when we hit our financial independence number. So my wife and I both quit our full-time jobs when when I was 32, she was 31. And then, she became a full-time stay-at-home mom. I switched over to part-time. So I work basically from home a few days a week. And then after 2 years, I wanted to, I was like, hey, this is a lot of fun, but I kind of want to try the full retirement thing. And so that's what I did. Ran that, did the full retirement for 6 months. After 5 months, I was feeling very unfulfilled, very antsy, because it's not, for a type A personality kind of person, it's not a good fit to, you're not going to feel happy and fulfilled just sitting watching Netflix and being unproductive and just kind of lounging around all the time. So that was a very big surprise and lesson learned on my end. So after 6 months, basically 5 months, I started looking for something new, and that's when the summit came along, and so I took that over. So now I just run the Build Wealth Canada podcast and then the Canadian Financial Summit, which I just realized is a really long answer to your question, but I'm trying to get the origin story in there too, because a lot of people are curious about that.
Sorry, you said the conference came along. How did the conference come along? It was your baby.
So I didn't build the conference from scratch. So what happened is it was already running for several years, and then actually the founders of the conference wanted to sell it to me. So I was looking for something new to take on, because I have the podcast, but I do 1 episode a month, right? So it's not. That's not enough to kind of get that fulfillment I was looking for. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to either scale up the kind of sort of the podcast piece somehow, or take on a new project, right? And so at that time, they were basically trying to sell me the conference, and I said, okay, well, let me just try it for a year to see if this is something I actually want to do. And so I ran it, grew it a lot, like more than doubled the conference size, like in that 1 year that I ran it, and then I was like, yeah, this is actually pretty fun. I'll be happy to continue doing this. And at that time, they also said, hey, actually, can we be back? They were happy with the results, I suppose. So because they were partners in it, right? And so they wanted to now join and be part of it again.
Now those are your partners.
So those are my partners now.
Got it.
So I went from like them trying to kind of sell it to me to now us just saying, hey guys, instead of you selling it to me, why don't we're partners and we run it together? Because like I said earlier, it's definitely not a one-person job. It's huge, especially when like a 20,000 person conference. It's pretty big.
Sorry, how many people attended?
It was over 20,000 Canadians. Wow. Yeah,
all across Canada.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, that's a good number of people.
Yeah. Oh, it's great now. Yeah. So like in this year we had Money Sense be part of it. Canadian Money Saver magazine be part of it. Just Enriched Academy. Also have just about all the big players were somehow involved in it for the most part. So it's hard to get everyone obviously, but it's definitely sort of the place to be for anyone interested in investing for sure.
Right. Did the sellers, your now partners, did they have a list of past clients that you were able to market to? Is that how part of the reason why you were able to get so many people out?
Oh yeah. So the way that it worked was they had their email list of past attendees. And so obviously when it was time for the new conference, all the people that attended in the past, I was able to invite them again. So a good chunk of people came from that. But then I promoted another way. So I would have different partners involved, and I would say, hey, it'd be great to have you as a guest, but can you also promote to your audience as well? And so that was really what grew it a lot, is sort of setting up these partnerships where it's like, hey, I'd love to have you on. I really like your content. It's very educational. A lot of people benefit from it. I'd love to pick your brain on what you do, and can help with financial literacy in Canada, but can you also promote it to your audience that you're going to be speaking at it? And that way, we kind of have, we can kind of grow this thing together, right? Because the more, if everyone does that, then the conference ends up being huge, which it was, like over 20,000 people. And like sort of, the rising tide, what's that expression? The rising tide raises all ships or something. Lifts all ships. Around those. So that was my sort of whole framework or thought process behind that. And it's been worked out. And now it's not so big that it's easy to get people to come on because it's so massive, right? So so that's sort of it in a nutshell.
And to bring up the Kornel High School course again for financial literacy. So that'll raise a lot of ships.
For sure.
And then previous to 2020, was it a live conference or was it still virtual then?
It was always virtual. Always virtual. Yeah.
Fascinating.
That makes it more fun, because if it's like as nice as it would be to have a in person, and there used to be one in Canada where it was like at the Toronto Library and some people would fly in. And it's pretty cool. But if you're the organizer of that, that's so much more stress, right? Because now you're dealing with venues, like the logistics, it just gets a lot more complicated, a lot more costly. You have to pay. There's no free tickets in that scenario because you got to pay the venue, right? You got to pay for all these things. You got to pay for food. So it's much more challenging. Whereas because it's online, there's no geographic restrictions, right? You could be at totally opposite ends of Canada and everybody can still attend and still do it. So I just find it's a much better fit, and it keeps my gray hairs at bay because it's a lot less stressful not having to worry about, oh, are we going to be able to sell enough tickets to cover these giant venue costs in downtown Toronto, right? We don't have to worry about that. So so it's been a good fit for that. But, big thing is the whole, everyone has access to it. Because the end goal is increasing financial literacy. And by making it digital, that's exactly what we can do. And by making the tickets free, everybody can attend, right? So no matter how wealthy you are or how poor you are, you'll get something out of it, right? Because we've got sort of beginner topics, but also a lot more advanced topics, right? So no matter who you are, no one sort of can attend because it's too much money, even though that might be the person that actually needs this information the most, right? So, so that's what it is in a nutshell.
That's amazing, because I have a lot of gray hair from when we did the conference in 2019.
I believe it.
Like, thank goodness, at least it was before the pandemic. I don't know what we would have done if we had made that same investment in the pandemic and before the pandemic and getting all that money tied up. Oh my Lord.
Oh yeah. I can feel the gray hairs growing just thinking about it. The mere thought.
We should, anytime you want to talk outside of this show, let me know.
Sure.
But running the conference, like the venue costs, I don't even know if people understand. Like, it's not even just the venue costs; it's all the other things that come on board, that are on top of that. Like, we have to hire a caterer, and like, are all the staff unionized or not? And then, if I want to bring in my own outside AV company, like, can I do that? And then I'm like, oh, you're over this certain number, you need to hire security. And like, okay, now you're over this certain number, you need to hire parking lot attendants. So it just keeps piling up.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you don't hit some numbers, a minimum, right, there's consequences to that, because the hotel, you signed a contract with the hotel or whatever, right? And you have to commit. So just very, very stressful, and restricts people. Well, especially now in the age of COVID, right? People want the digital piece. So just so anybody can have access, right? And so it's become a safety thing as well, right? So it's been. Yeah, so COVID hasn't hurt the conference at all, which is nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm disappointed I didn't meet you sooner. And before we were recording, I blamed you because you didn't accept my friend request on Facebook. So no one tried to add Kornel on Facebook.
Yeah, I don't really go on social media much, so don't
that's probably why you have less gray hair than me too.
What's that?
It's probably why you also have less gray hair than me.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how you did it. How did you do it? How did you retire at 32? Because I don't, I think, so people who listen to this show, all 12 of them, we have quite a few guests on this show who have retired, but of the population, like your friends, how many people do you know retired in their 30s?
Yeah. The only reason I would say I know people like that now is because I'm a podcaster, I'm in the space. And so I've interviewed those people. But yeah, it's extremely rare for sure.
Extremely rare.
Yeah. But to answer your question, there's a lot of small elements, but I would say at a high level, things that really, really move the needle for us over the years is, one, straight out of university, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, we moved in together right away. And so by doing that, we were able to become a dual income household right away. And so that helps a lot, right? Because there's a lot of sort of economies of scale that you get when you do that. And for someone that doesn't have a significant other, or does have one, but they're not at that point in the relationship where they're willing to do that right out of university, which is understandable. The alternative I often suggest to people is, well, what about you do the roommate thing, right? Instead of renting some condo and 1-bedroom condo or whatever, what if you, especially this is a real estate show, right? What if you actually bought a property and then you had, you turn it into like a rooming house, right? Where you have one of the rooms and you rent out the other rooms and you make money, that way, right? And so that way you can sort of get some of those economies of scale that I got, but by not actually being married or not having a significant other, but by doing roommates, right? So, anyways, that's kind of like a workaround to get sort of the same, I think, benefits or very similar. But that was the one thing, right? Is to become a dual income household. So when you have 2 full-time incomes, 0 kids, lots of time because you don't have kids yet, you can really ramp things up. So that was the one thing. And then the other thing was really living off one salary for, like, we've been doing that for like over a decade. and so that was a real game changer. And so there was no secret formula. There was no like big windfall we got where, oh, we've invested in some Bitcoin when it was $1 and now we didn't have anything like that. Nothing crazy. It was all just these like small sort of these incremental things, little optimizations here, controlling our spending, right? And just you kind of like compounding, right? You kind of do that over time. In my case, over a decade, and things start to really, those results really start to show. So really by living off one salary, what we did is when we still had our mortgage, one of our salaries would go towards just paying the day-to-day expenses, and the other one would go towards paying off the mortgage. And so that's how we did it. And sometimes, we'd have to dip in, like, if there was a big car repair, then we'd have to kind of dip into the other salary, things like that. But for the most part, that was our goal. And that's what we always strive to do. And we tried to manage our money and lifestyle in such a way that allowed us to do that. And so by doing that, we were able to basically, spend several $1,000s in additional mortgage pay down to be able to do that, right? And so that was really sort of the gist of it, right? So just controlling spending, controlling our lifestyle, that kind of a thing. Now, in retrospect, I would not have done that because this was so I graduated in 2007, which was right before the great financial crisis. And so that, being straight out of school, not knowing much about investing yet and about market cycles, that event really freaked me out because I would see my director, who I would report it to, he's like, oh, I just lost like $100,000 this past week because, we're going through the 2008 financial crisis. And so for me, I kind of let fear take control and was like, okay, well, this stock market thing is way too risky for me, right? Real estate seems crazy risky too now because, you see like hear about all these foreclosures in the United States, that kind of thing, right? And so my sort of defense mechanism, what's that?
There are lots of them.
Yeah. And so my defense mechanism went up, which in retrospect was a mistake. And I'm just like, you know what? Let's just plow the money into the mortgage because every dollar I put in the mortgage is that I'm not going to lose that, right? And so that I went for like the ultra safe approach and just pay down the mortgage. In retrospect, knowing what I know now, if I was to do it all over again, I would have invested, just done total market index ETF investing, which is pretty much all I do now, because then I would have been able to ride that wave back up. I would have been able to ride that recovery. And so, man, like I calculated it once, and it hurts me to see how much money I lost in terms of the impact on our net worth. If only I did that instead and invested it instead of paying down the mortgage, our net worth would have been so much higher. We would have been able to retire even earlier. But you live, you learn, and that, yeah. So definitely, just because I always kind of say that cautionary tale a little bit, because even though it worked out well for us, it's not something that I would recommend where you just like focus on paying down your mortgage because it's not the highest sort of expected return that you can get. So that was it in a nutshell, right? And then once the mortgage was paid off, I started the podcast. So what happened is mortgage was paid off. We have all this extra money now that we can just spend if we wanted to, right? Because we don't have the mortgage payment anymore. But what I realized is, well, hold on, we're actually pretty behind on our retirement savings now because we've been pumping money towards the mortgage. Our RSPs, TFSAs aren't maxed out. Like we've just been doing the contribution up, at work, but that's pretty much it. And so kind of the next thing was, well, what if I start a podcast and start interviewing different experts in Canada and different financial planners, different investing experts, right? The tax people, just to learn the best practices when it comes to saving for retirement, financial planning, investing, saving on taxes, that kind of thing. And so that was really the project. The podcast would give me an excuse to basically talk to these really top-notch people, essentially for free, and share with the rest of Canada. And they will come on and do it and not charge me like $300 an hour because they're getting some publicity out of it, right? So that was kind of my idea. And I thought, hey, even if the podcast fails, I would have still learned an absolute ton, and I would have helped out, hopefully a few thousand Canadians. And so, everybody still wins, right? But then the podcast actually did well. Like it's over 1.2 million downloads at this point. It's like been one of the biggest ones in Canada for like 7 years now. So turns out the podcast actually did well. But I basically ended up applying what I've learned by interviewing all these different guests and apply that to my own portfolio, which was the kind of the intention all along. And that helped us keep things really, really optimized from an investment fees, keeping, investment fees low, keeping taxes low, all of that, financial planning. And that helped us actually achieve that financial independence number when we were 32. So we can dive deeper into any section if you want, but sort of at a high level, just so I'm not talking for 20 minutes about our backstory. that's basically what it was in a somewhat summarized form.
So more fun. Let's use this facts of the day. I actually had a past guest of the show. His name is Brian Zammit. So he backed up the truck in 2007. So him and his wife, I believe they each collect $70,000 in dividends.
Whoa, nice. Yeah. And there's one financial blogger that I follow. He's in the States. He's at Root of Good. His name is Justin, and I interviewed him as one of my first guests. And it was, and he actually did kind of what you're talking about. Is he went, hey, he understood that he's older than me. He understood this, before I did, and he went kind of all in on, all in depends how you define that, right? But he invested as much as he could during that time because he knew there was a recovery coming. And I mean, now his portfolio is like 2 million plus. Like he's done really, really well because he actually took advantage of that. Whereas me, here I was paying them my mortgage because I was too scared or whatever. You know what I mean? So, but it is what it is, right? You're fresh out of university.
You have no one to show you the ropes.
No, and I'm a business grad too, right? But even in business school, right, they teach you how to be really good at working in a corporation. They're not teaching you, ETF index investing 101, right? Like that wasn't like, I went to one of the best business schools in the country, and
where'd you go?
I went to Laurier.
Yeah. Excellent.
So they have a what's that?
Excellent school.
Yeah. So they have a business co-op, business administration co-op program that like at the time it's like was one of the best in Canada. I was like top 3, and depending who you ask, right? Like you ask a Laurier person, like, it's number 1. Yeah. But it was. I remember at that time it was like Laurier, Queens, or Western were like the top. Like if you're going to go to business, these are the ones to go to, right? But so even in that school, like it was fantastic at getting you a job after university and a high-paying one.
Because you had the co-op.
Awesome. I had the co-op. Yeah. So getting a high-paying job in your field was, I'll say relatively easy, right? But it's not easy because you have to work your tail off to actually get there and get into co-op and get those jobs. Like you have to work really hard, and you have to have a really high average to get in too. But once you did that, you actually were able to get a really high-paying job. So that helped too, right? Like I had a really good high-paying job right out of university as well. Sorry, what was the question?
I don't even remember. But yeah, you went to better school than I did.
We're going on a rant. Yeah.
I went to Ivy. Like you graduated 2007 during the financial crisis. I graduated 2001, right after 9/11.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I was in finance. I remember I was walking into financial markets class, second year financial. So it was my 4th year financial markets class, and the planes hit the buildings. And like, I had no idea how bad things would get.
Yeah.
I knew it was like, that was a horrible loss of life day, but I had no idea what the ripple effect would be into the entire markets.
Yeah.
Not just the entire financial markets, but also like my own personal job market.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, I guess I got lucky in a sense too. Like I didn't get laid off or anything like that. Despite like being a relatively high earner, like early on or whatever. But so no, it kind of, but yeah, the hard work paid off, right, as well. But I guess you can really relate to the whole having some fear, right, early in your career, right? Yeah.
Markets tank. So I remember in 2007, financial markets are tanking. Really disappointed in ourselves. We only bought one investment property in 2007. So that one did really well. Yeah, we were the opposite. I've always been the opposite with debt. I'm always like, oh, it's so cheap.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think I can make more money with all these investments.
Yeah,
and just pay like, at the time it was probably like 4 or 5%. I was paying 4 or 5%, but I'm trying to make 15-20% with my real estate investments. It worked out a lot higher than that. Past does not predict the future, folks, so don't sue us. But yeah, you mentioned ETFs. So yeah, get rich slow. This isn't get rich overnight. This isn't Shibu, a new crypto Doge currency stuff. This is and sorry, what year did you start with the slower paced investments?
Yeah, we were, I can't remember what year it was exactly, but it was somewhere around when I was 29-ish, because that's when, the mortgage was paid off. And so we started plowing. So my wife had a pension plan out of her work, just a defined contribution pension, nothing fancy, right? So we were still, what's that?
A contribution. I thought you said benefit. I was like, whoa.
No, just no.
Y'all rich.
I wish. That would be nice. I know I'm so jealous of the the teachers and the police officers. And all that.
We're all jealous.
That'd be so nice. Yeah.
That's why they get so much anger in the news. Okay, sorry, continue.
Yeah. So it was around. I would say it was around that time that I became like a DIY investor, because before that we were still technically investing in her defined contribution pension plan, but that's like capped and that kind of thing, right, in terms of the employer match and all that. So so it was around that time. But then we also had, I should mention, we had a real estate holding as well, which did well. So we had a rental property too, that I had, and so I mean, Kitchener, real estate's just been crazy in Canada in terms of it just going up in value. It's been nuts, and so we had that. So we definitely, that helped us retire early as well, because we definitely made out good. So when we actually hit that retirement number, what we did is I sold the rental property, put that all into ETFs, into passive total market ETFs. And then we also actually downsized our house as well. So, because that was another way that we can make the numbers work a lot more. And then basically took those proceeds and put those into, index ETFs as well. And so those were sort of the two levers we pulled: is selling the rental property plus downsizing, as well. And because we were willing to do that, like, so also, like, we went down to one car instead of two, right? So we did these significant trimmings, things that really impact your expenses on an annual basis, like housing and transportation are huge, right? So we cut those quite a bit, and that also helped us make the numbers work in terms of reaching. And then also, in case I did something wrong, I still had the part-time job that I was doing as well, right? And so that was kind of there as like an extra little cushion, just because I'm a risk-averse kind of guy when it comes to those kinds of things. Yeah.
So what do you do for cash flow then?
Right now?
Yeah.
Or when I was fully retired?
Both.
Sure.
Because the decision to semi-retire, retire, either one, like you have to have still income, some sort of income coming in, just keep the lights on.
Yeah. So we still don't have a mortgage, right? So that helps a lot. We only have one car, and it's like a $15,000 car, like after taxes and stuff. So we don't those kind of two big things that really hurt cash flow on a month-to-month basis. Where someone buys like a $70,000 car and take on debt, that kind of thing. So we don't have that, right? Yeah.
We just ordered a Tesla. I know the feeling.
So in our case, we own one car. It's a van. We have two kids, right? Pay like 15 grand cash for it. So that's one thing, plus no mortgage. So that helps a lot with cash flow. We live in Kitchener as opposed to like downtown Toronto. So obviously that helps a lot in terms of cash flow from just how obviously it's a lot more expensive to live in Toronto, even like groceries, things of that nature. So there's that. And so, when we were semi-retired, or like now when we are, and also when I first started, we were semi-retired. And so when we did that, whenever we got dividends, so I'm not a dividend investor. I just do total market index ETF investing, like I said, but still, even when you're that kind of investor, you still get dividends, right? So with the investments I buy, I get them every quarter. And so that generates some cash flow. So I would, I'll take that out, and basically use that. So that's one area. Since I was semi-retired, I'd also have the cash flow coming from the part-time job. The podcast was making a little bit of money then as well. So some of the cash flow was coming in from there. And then also I had a bit of a cash cushion in case the markets took a dive. And when they didn't take a dive, I would also sell off some of the ETFs, right? So if we had, so I would, that's basically it, right? So taking out, I was like, okay, well, if I take out like 3.5% of the portfolio per year, from all the modeling I've seen and all that, and all the research I've done around the subject and the different guests I've interviewed, that actually is sustainable, right? So, awesome. So there was that. And then also because I have two kids, we have the CCB, the Canada Child Benefit. And so we get quite a bit of that too. And because we're technically like on the lower income side, because my wife and I are retired, we actually get pretty high Canada Child Benefit, right? So that actually helps a lot. And so that's really what we did in semi-retirement in the beginning. It's pretty much what we're doing now as well. When I did that full retirement thing, then it was just living fully off the portfolio. And really the same thing, except, there wasn't any money coming in from a job per se. Like there was the podcast, but it was a relatively small amount at the time. And so yeah, it was just you take the dividends, you take the Canada Child benefit, and then you sell off a portion of your investments. Like, so the withdrawal rate that I liked was 3.5%, around there, maybe 3.25, like depending how conservative you want to get, but just ballpark, that's what it was, and that was enough. So we still keep our expenses really, really low, and that's what allows us essentially to do that. And if, like I said, if the markets did take a dive, we had like a bit of a cash cushion as well saved up, just so that I'm not stressing out overnight, because the markets, like when COVID happened, right, it was like a 30-ish, depending what you invest in, right? It was like a 35% drop, depending what you own, right? So in those kinds of scenarios, I had some sort of cash in a high interest savings account set aside, so that, okay, after the dividends, after the Canada Child benefit, I can still take some of those out to pay for our groceries, whatever. And so during good years, yeah, we had extra money coming in because I'm withdrawing a certain percentage every year. And then, so yeah, maybe we take some extra, we buy some extra stuff that's fun, or travel a bit more or whatever. On years when the markets are not doing too good, then yeah, we don't incur those unnecessary discretionary expenses, right? And so that's again, in a nutshell, that's how we managed it. It gets more complex than that. There's a lot of spreadsheets and modeling that I've done, and interviewed lots of financial planners, had them run my numbers as well to make sure this is sustainable. Like, I've been researching this now for like 7 years. It's been an ongoing thing that I've been maximizing constantly. But I mean, again, at a high level, sort of macro level, that's essentially how we did it, just living off the portfolio. And I mean, we've been lucky. We haven't had a 2008 scenario, right? Where, like, yeah, we had COVID, but then the markets recovered really quickly. Yeah. So fortunately, I've been fortunate where the portfolio has actually been growing instead of decreasing, despite us being retired. So that worked out pretty well.
Amazing. So for someone who's new to this subject, how much a month do you think they need to be able to make between all these income streams that you mentioned, like dividends from the ETFs, part-time job if they choose to, between the podcast, child benefit, Canadian child care benefit? How much do you think a household needs to bring in?
Well, it's really a function of how much they spend, right? Because it doesn't really matter. I should say this carefully, right? But the amount you make, like, you could make $1 million a year, but if you're spending $2 million, you're going to go into debt, right? And
people do that.
And I realize that's an extreme example. Oh, but like you said, people
professional athletes.
Oh, exactly, right. You hear about all the time, athletes, different like musicians, like people that they made a ton of money in their 20s, whether as athletes or singers or whatever the case may be, and they blew it. Like it's gone, right? And so really, yeah, the income thing is important, but the spending thing is really, really critical. So it's really just a function of how much you spend. So yeah, but yeah, like, to give you some actual numbers, again, because we have one car, because we don't have the mortgage, because we don't live in a high cost of living area, right? Because of all that, our expenses are relatively low, and I don't spend much money on things either. So we basically our spending is between $30,000 and $35,000 per year. That's basically what we spend. Yeah. And then, so if you kind of want to do that math yourself on a spreadsheet or whatever, and again, this is a crazy complex topic because there's taxes, different investments are taxed different ways, there's different accounts, right? So this is not like you can't just create your own financial plan, retirement plan on the back of a napkin or in like a little 5-minute work on a spreadsheet, right? This is something, again, like, I've been researching this forever, but I mean, just to sort of give you a ballpark and something to aim towards. So one, figure out what your actual expenses are. And again, for someone that wants to do the early retirement thing, like using something like 3.25%, 3.5% withdrawal rate, from all the research that I've seen and all the experts I've interviewed, that an overwhelming majority of financial planners who really know the stuff, that actually model this out in software and spreadsheets and all that, they will say for an early retiree that could be sustainable. A lot of people might have heard about the 4% rule, but that was not intended for early retirees, right? That was intended for someone that's in the US and then they retire at 60. They want to see if they have enough money to reach age 90, right? Which is a very different proposition than somebody that retires in their 32 or 30, and they've got like a 60-year retirement instead of a 30-year retirement, right? So that's why 4% rule you've got to be really, really careful about. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Like the one that what I've sort of subscribed to now, because there's all these different ways to live off your portfolio. The one that I personally like, that I feel comfortable with, is a variable percentage withdrawal strategy. So what I do is, with the 4% rule, it's like a static amount. And again, this is like a whole deeper conversation and we can get into it if you want. But with the 4% rule, it's like a static thing, right? So let's say you have $1 million 4% is $40,000. And then you adjust that for inflation every year, and you're taking that out every single year. That's the kind of assumption in that rule. However, the big negative behind that rule, by just following that blindly, is that when the markets are tanking, you're still taking out 4%, which like maybe you should take out less because you're selling your stocks or your ETFs at a low. When the markets are doing really good, you're still only spending that. Maybe you can actually spend less. I'm sorry, maybe you can actually spend more, right? Because the markets are doing good. So I personally like the more variable approach. So what I will do is I like using 4%, but on a variable, right? So if our portfolio is like, just to keep the math simple, let's say it's $1 million, then okay, we can take 40,000 out because that's 4%. But let's say the markets gets cut in half, which is pretty extreme example that doesn't typically happen, right? But let's say, for a short period of time, the market falls by 50%. Well, then now we're only going to take out half that. So now we're only going to take out 20,000, right? And then we get into questions like, okay, well, do you have a cash cushion to sort of hold you out for that recovery? Do you have any other income sources like Canada Child Benefit, like real estate, rental properties, things of that nature, right? And so you sort of want to model that out where, okay, let's run these different scenarios, and are we going to be okay? Am I okay maybe taking on a part-time job because I don't want to sell my ETFs when they're,
Right.
just went down 50%.
And some people just want to stay busy too. People don't want to go.
Exactly. Maybe I should use 50%. Like let's say 30%, that's kind of maybe a bit more like realistic of a really bad sort of scenario. Right. So that's how I really think about it. So, when your markets are doing really well, when they're up like, over 10%, then okay, that's maybe when you take that Europe trip you wanted to take. When the markets fell 30%, okay, you're not going to do the Europe trip that year. You're going to do you're going to do things locally, right? Well, and then like the whole craft dinner thing, it's like, that's when you can sort of think, okay, do I want to have a cash cushion so I don't have to go that extreme, right? How much, because it's like the more money you keep save, that's opportunity cost, right? Like if I have, let's say 100, I don't have 100,000 in cash because the opportunity cost that would be too high. But I mean, that can sustain you for a very long time if you are, if your expenses are low, right? But if you invested, let's say 50,000 of that into the markets, if you're, let's say, expecting 8% long-term return in equity markets, I mean, that's a lot of money that you just gave up for that extra peace of mind, right? So it's very much a personal thing, right? Where how much volatility and how much instability am I willing to endure to actually get a bigger pie at the end of the day, right? So very much a personal situation, but that's personally how I do it. Hopefully I explained that in a somewhat coherent way.
Kornel, where can any financial advisors I don't know if the word recommend is the term, because it's a common topic, especially for people who are more on the successful side of anything they invest in, like gold, crypto, whatever it is, real estate, stocks, whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's actually, I believe it's hard to find a financial advisor to talk to this area. Where can folks find one?
Yeah, so the kind of organization that I'm a big fan of, that I kind of recommend people to by default now whenever they want some sort of help, and I have I have an actual special sort of page set up, or you can get like a free assessment type of thing with them. It's over at buildwealthcanada.ca/enriched. And that is basically a company called Enriched Academy. And they have a lot of different coaches there that can actually help you. And what's really nice about them is that they don't try to sell you investments, which is huge for me.
They're not trying to sell mutual funds.
Exactly. They do not try to do that, which is a huge reason why. So I've actually gone through their coaching program myself, and I'm very happy with it. And I've tried to get them to suggest once just to see if they'll do it, and they won't, which is great. Because that's actually what because I want to sort of, test drive before I recommend this to people, right? Because a lot of people listen to the show. So, and so they don't, which is great, because in Canada, there's such a huge conflict of interest with so many, like you said, it's hard to actually find a good fee-for-service financial advisor that's not trying to sell you something on the side. And now we've gone to this point where it's crazy, where people know that they should have a fee-for-service financial advisor or planner.
But they don't know where to find one.
So they can't find one. And even and there's even advisors out there who actually do sell products, but still call themselves a fee-for-service financial planner, because it's not regulated. Like anybody can call themselves that technically, right? And you get people that are like, oh, I'm a fee-for-service financial planner. And then a few sessions in, they're trying to sell you high-fee mutual funds or other investments, right? So, and
then there's the ones, I've asked some friends for recommendations, and they refer me to someone, and they won't talk to you unless you have $5 million assets under management.
Yeah. And that's the other type of financial planners out there, which can be really good. Like there are some really good ones. Like I know, like I've had Ben Felix on from PWL Capital before. Like they're a very reputable a company in that field, and they do a assets under management model where they will take a percentage of your portfolio as their fee, but they're not trying to push you product either, or they're not trying to sell you some product because they get a commission for it on the back end. So I'm a fan of those guys as well. But then the challenge that some people have is that, like they're more for the higher net worth people, right? So I forgot what their minimum, like I interviewed another one of their staff at one point, and I think at that point she said like over $1 million, I believe, was sort of the cutoff.
Right.
Like they'll make some exceptions, like if someone's like a young doctor, like so they're obviously going to be above that eventually, then okay. But generally, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but this is just what she told me like a few years back. So kind of what you're saying, right, is there are places like that are reputable, that do things well. However, you do actually need a pretty sizable portfolio to do that, right? And then but for places that people that don't have that large portfolio yet, which is the majority of Canadians, so these days I'm pretty much sending everyone over to Enrich Academy, because they don't sell the product. You're paying them like a flat fee, so there's no commission. They don't take a percentage of portfolio, nothing like that. You're basically paying for advice, and they optimize different things in your financial life. So they'll do investments, but they'll also like look at insurance and your cash flow and things like that. So I'm a really big fan of that. And that's like, so I actually partnered with them because I'm like, look, I need someone that can help a lot of Canadians. Like I can't just have a one person show, because there's too many people that, that I'm going to be sending
you're gonna break someone,
like,
right?
What's that? Sorry?
You're going to break someone. Too much traffic.
You're
not going to get back to people. Then your listeners going to be angry. You're just trying to make referrals with just to try to help people, and it goes sideways.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I did that once where I had like one financial planner that I would recommend people to. And then like we did one thing together, like it was at the summit that we talked about. And after one summit, he was booked for the whole year. And so so it's like, okay, well, that's great. Like I'm super happy for them, but I don't want to keep sending people that way. Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, you can talk to me in 3 months. Like that's not a good experience, right? No. So with Enrich Academy, I like what they're doing because they actually have like people they can scale up, and I've actually gone through the process myself. So I trust them. I know they're not going to try to sell some garbage to people that I, send their way. And so I'm a big fan. And like I said, they do like the free assessment, like for people that I send to them, they do a free assessment thing. So, they're
not going to like it when they talk to me. I tell Kornel sent me. Because to be honest, like I've none of my staff, all my staff cost more than what it costs you to live in a year. Not one of my staff costs less than that. And we have a lot of staff. I know you can't see beyond that door, but there's a whole bunch of people on the other side of that door, and none of them can eat for that. Kornel, I'm loving this, by the way.
Awesome.
Because as often with I'm sure you've run into them, like real estate folks, they're often trying to build empires.
Yeah.
They're so focused on growing top line and net worth that they often and then they often forget about why they got into it. Was for the freedom.
Right.
Right now it's
a common trap, and not just with real estate people, but just with as a real estate investor person, especially once you get to that higher level where you own multiple properties. I mean, at that point, you're basically a business owner, right? And so it's very much like there's a very common entrepreneurial trap, right? Where you do this for freedom and do not have to work crazy hours, and then you end up working more hours than if you like just and you have more instability than if you just ended up working for someone. So I hear you. Very common.
So what does life look like for you? Like how many hours a week are you working, for example?
So I'm trying hard to really stick to the semi-retirement part-time piece. So I'm trying to do only 20, just like 20 hours a week. So I'm actually experimenting with the sort of the lifestyle thing. Like the 20 seems like a good starting point, because I figure with that I can sort of get that intellectual stimulation, the problem solving stimulation. I get to work with people that I actually want to, like smart people. Working with smart people to solve problems and things that you actually want to fix is actually enjoyable, right? So currently my hypothesis is that with 20 hours a week, I can fulfill that intellectual, creative, interpersonal, relationship piece. sufficiently to keep me happy. And then the rest of the time, basically the focus is on health and family. So huge health focus, because it's like, what's the point of being retired or semi-retired if you're going to die early because you're obese and you have heart problems and things like that, right? So I work really hard on that piece, and then the family thing is really critical as well. Like I said, I have 2 kids, a wife, so yeah, just to spend time with them, especially because from what I hear from other parents is that once the kids get older, they want to hang out with you less and less. And my kids are 3 and 7, so they're at that age now where it's like they actually want to hang out with me and enjoy me and stuff. So I'm really milking that for all it's worth, because I know the end is coming where they're gonna, where it's not cool to hang out with that anymore, right? So those are the priorities. Yeah, so I might get more involved, like probably once they're both kind of busy with their friends and don't want to hang out so much
like
with their
18,
dad anymore. Yeah. I heard it's even before that from some people. Like some parents told me it's like 14. Like we'll see. It's probably different from parent, depending on your kid and that kind of a thing. So I'm always going to want to be really involved, but I realize now it's like there's going to be more. But I think eventually once they're sort of gone, or they want a lot less time together, then I'll probably focus more on charitable type work. That's my current plan. So fortunately I have a podcast and I have the summit, which has a really big audience. And so basically to leverage that, where it's like, hey, we're going to provide financial literacy like we always have, and we're going to help everyone, but let's incorporate a more like charity element to it, right? Like whether it's like the Canadian Food Bank, something like that. So like, percentage of profits go towards the food bank or what, things of that nature, right? Maybe even start my own charity or whatever. So we'll see, but that's kind of the plan right now.
That's pretty cool. My kids are 6 and 7. So their bubble is small. So they actually think, I'm strong or I'm good at what I do. So as soon as that's broken, then they're kicking them out.
Where they look up to you, right? And then eventually it's like, my dad doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah.
And by the time my son's 16, I'll be looking up to him, like physically, I mean, so. Anytime you want to talk about charity, my wife and I, we've had our own charity since 2016.
Nice.
Yeah. So we have our own registered charity. If you ever want to talk about logistics and how to start and stuff like that.
I'd love to. Yeah. That's very much of interest, and something I definitely would be interested in learning about. Like now it's sort of like, okay, let's dedicate time to your kids, make sure they're set up for success kind of thing, while they're still impressionable. Because I feel if I take the charity thing on a lot now, then it that the time's got to come from somewhere. But I think for sure once that starts not being as time intensive, the charity thing would be awesome. I've always been.
It's actually not that bad. We just donate our own money to charity, and we work with a wholesaler in Toronto. And the wholesaler is actually the wholesaler for like other big retailers, like Walmart, for example. Yeah. So for this Christmas, for example, we're buying winter coats and shoes. Those are 2 of the greatest needs for kids right now. So we're buying around $20,000 worth, I think.
Nice.
And then we're going to drop it off to the schools.
That's awesome.
In Hamilton, Ontario.
Very cool.
It's
not
that bad.
That's awesome.
It's not that bad once it's set up. Actually, I should clarify. Again, because my wife's an accountant. Because you understand accounting for corporations. A charity, the way ours is structured, our charity is a corporation. So that gets donated, right? That's a significant cost for any charity to do the accounting for.
Right.
Yeah. So
and that's what's kind of like keeping me from like starting my own, for instance, is like, okay, I got to learn like all the accounting behind it, and there's all this government regulation and all this stuff. So
yes. Yes. Because you can imagine like it's been abused heavily.
Exactly. Yeah. So I get why they have to do it. So it's like, I'll kind of like, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. Or piggyback on an existing charity, right? And say like, look, well, I'll just partner with you guys, and I'll, donate a portion or send people your way, that kind of a thing, that want to support your cause like that. There's different ways of doing it. Right. So, but that's awesome. That's so great to hear that you're doing that. My thing, like the whole quote thing sounds great. Kind of the one I had top of mind was with nutrition. So like, especially like, if you're going to like lower income schools or areas where maybe the kid doesn't have enough nutrition to be totally, like, how can you do well in school if you're starving, right? And you can't focus, right? That kind of a thing. So to help families sort of in that area, because also it hurts their brain development. I remember seeing some research about that, how it's like if a child is deprived of certain nutrients when they're younger, it actually like impairs their brain development, which actually hurts them long term. So I mean, to me, it's crazy that in Canada developed country with all this money that kind of stuff actually exists, right? It blows my mind. So yeah, it'd be good to be a positive force in that area for me personally. So that's kind of what's on my radar right now. But I'm trying to, again, still be a very be a very, very present dad.
Yeah, we can chat. We
as,
can chat outside the podcast. I have friends that you leverage our charity as well.
That's awesome.
So then the donations come from our charity. We have a separate page and link for them. So all the money is earmarked for them. Yeah, and then
that's great.
So they don't have to set up, because not everyone is an accountant.
Yes.
to do their own accounting and So yeah, just leverage.
I appreciate you telling me this. It's inspirational. I'm excited about doing something like that for sure.
Awesome. So Kornel, you mentioned. So let's have some like bigger questions. Let's go back to, you mentioned before, but it was really specific. But if you were to do it all again, what would you do differently? And then the other way to phrase the question is like, what are you teaching your kids around life, financial independence? Because it must be weird for them. Like when they tell their kids, when parents or their kids, like, what's your dad do? He sits at home. He talks to people on the computer. That's what he does for a living. He's not a fireman. Like, my dad's a fireman.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you teach your kids? What would you do differently?
Well, so the 3-year-old is just, I mean, he's 3, right? So he's not, he's learning.
Buffett, yeah.
So he's still too young for me to have conversations like that with him about. But with my daughter, who's 7, she's in grade 2. So with her, I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't have like a best practices solution to say, hey, look, I've researched this for days and here's an interview, a dozen people about the subject, and here's sort of what I recommend based on all the research. So I don't have anything like that right now. It's something that I'm working on and trying to figure out now, because I'm noticing now in grade 2, even in grade 1 a bit, they are, they'll even play an app online and they want to buy something in the app, and it's like, okay, do you just give them the money? How do you make them earn it? That kind of a thing, right? So so right now I would say she's at that age where it's very much top of mind for me. So I'm trying to figure it out. So I don't really have any like gold standard things that I've learned yet, because I'm sort of experimenting and in the research phase right now. But the big thing that that's very much that I've been trying to kind of instill on her is that you're not just given things, that you have to actually earn it, right? Because that's how it is in the real world. Like, if you get something for doing nothing, great, I'm happy for you. But for the vast majority of people, you actually have to earn things, right? And so that's kind of one thing that I've been like, okay, you want to buy this app? Okay, well, is there some extra chores that you can do? Can you help out in this way? So already teaching them like, okay, you do some work to, you do something of value to someone and then you get compensation for that. And then you can use that to spend things, right? And then you can spend all of it at once, or do you save some of it, or do you save all of it, right? So starting to have those conversations, is just so that they understand the relationship between actually like working and earning money and getting something, right? And so I think that's really, really critical. But then it's kind of the thing that I struggle with is that I haven't really figured out yet is how do you still, because you don't want them to be only purely motivated by money either, right? So there's the whole thing about like intrinsically, like, hey, I should help my dad with this thing because he's family and we're a family unit and we're a team and we're supposed to help each other out, as opposed to, because I've heard, I'm sure you've probably heard parents too, where they're talking to their kid, asking them to do something, and the kid's like, well, how much are you going to pay me? So obviously you don't want that either, right? So it's a delicate thing so unfortunately I don't have a really optimized answer for you, because I've got certain things that are important, but I haven't really narrowed it down. Your other question about kind of if I was to do it all over again, what would I do? So the whole being a dual income household right away was definitely a very good move. The buying a house right as soon as possible thing was not a good move. So that's something I would do different. So we bought a house really early on, and what happened, and it was in the GTA area, like in Toronto area. And we thought, oh, well, yeah, we're going to be here forever, right? Because this is where like a lot of the jobs are, that kind of thing, right? Well, why wouldn't we be here, right? So we bought a house as soon as possible. And it turns out we actually didn't like living in the GTA. We actually liked it back home. Our family was here. It was home. We just enjoy it more here. And so I'm sure a lot of your listeners already know, you don't buy a house if you think that you're only going to own it for a relatively short period of time, right? You want to usually I think it's like people say like 5 years plus, at least kind of 5 years, right? That you want to expect to own it. And so that was a mistake. So I would have rented first to see if we actually like the area, especially early in your career, right? Things change a lot, right? Like you may decide to change careers. You want to be sort of mobile so you can move to take advantage of different opportunities because you don't have kids yet probably. So, you don't want to, like when you have kids, it's different, right? Because then like you don't want to switch schools for them all the time, that kind of a thing, right? So that's one piece I would do differently. And then on the investing side, which I've already alluded to, right? Instead of really pushing to pay down the mortgage ASAP, I would have just done total market index investing to start things off. Like for most people, I would say just do asset allocation ETFs, where you're just buying one ETF, it'll automatically rebalance. When your portfolio is small, a little bit extra MER that you're going to pay is negligible because your portfolio is not that big yet. Because the way the fees work, right, it's a percentage of your total basically your total portfolio, or however much you're investing in that ETF. And so if you have like $100,000 portfolio, that's not a very big amount. When it's 500,000, that's a different story, right? If you're just getting started, you don't even have $100,000 portfolio yet. So I would say just do asset allocation ETFs in the beginning. I would encourage you to go as high equity as you can. So like for me, I like XEQT, VEQT, which are the all equity asset allocation ETFs. Let me just make sure I said that right. XEQT and VEQT. Those are the tickers if you ever want to look them up. Again, do your own due diligence. I'm not giving you financial advice. This is like general, helpful tips and education. But that's what I would do in the beginning. And then once the portfolio got bigger, then I would start, okay, now let's look into, like once the portfolio was well into the six figures, then I would say, okay, now let's actually look into potentially buying individual ETFs, because then you can optimize things a little bit more. So that's what I do now. So different ETFs, depending what's in them, they are taxed differently depending on which accounts they are in. And so there's a lot of sort of tax strategy that you can do around that, which again is not worth doing when your portfolio is small, because this is like, we're talking like 1% kind of savings, right? So again, if your portfolio is 7 figures or mid 6 figures, that actually can add up, and that might be worth your time to spend time and optimize for that. When your portfolio is under 100K, I would say maybe under 200K, I wouldn't even really bother with that because it's not worth your time, unless you're like, look, I want to learn it anyway, I'm going to be doing this in the future anyway, I enjoy it, then fine, do it as like because you actually enjoy it, right? But so that's really what I would do. And for people that don't want to get really complex into like the tax planning and optimizations and things of that nature, then you could just do asset allocation ETFs all the way through. And like I'm in this space, so I know some really smart people with significant investment assets who totally have the ability, the knowledge and resources to optimize things in that way, but they still choose not to. They still just buy an asset allocation ETF because it's like, look, I'll pay a little bit more in MER. Yeah, maybe it's not like perfectly tax optimized, but you know what? It's so much easier, and it's just I can just buy this and then move on with my life and do other things, right? And so I get it, like you're paying for the convenience, and for some people that's totally worth it. For me, I'm like an optimizer. I love just optimizing every little thing, and so for me, I do enjoy buying the actually individual ETFs. Yes, it's more work, but you're saving like thousands of dollars in terms of like fees and taxes and things like that. So for me, it's worth it, and I'm okay jumping through those hoops to do that because I'm a money nerd, but that's not for everyone. So I hope that answers your question in terms of like if I was to do it all over again, that is what I would do. And if you're like really into real estate, which I suppose a lot of your audience is because it's a real estate show, then yeah, I think a big one would be, and I tried doing this, but my wife refused and I couldn't sell her on it. But a big one is, yeah, if you buy a property that's like a duplex, right? And then you live in one part of it and then you rent out like the basement, or you live in the basement and you rent out the top, or, whatever the case may be. I mean, that can help you so much in terms of cash flow. It's incredible. So I tried so hard to get my wife to agree to that, but she's like, no, I don't want other people living with us. She's very, very like put her foot down. So I was not a good enough salesman at that time to persuade her to do that. But if she was up for that, I totally would have done that. If I was single, I would have totally done the roommate thing that we talked about. I would have tried to get financing in whatever way I could. Well, not whatever, at a reasonable rate, so that I could live in one part and then rent out the rest. That would be awesome because then you get to enjoy the equity appreciation, right? And you've got some people paying for your mortgage. Obviously, the numbers have to work. It's not like you just do that blindly, because you could, if you get the wrong deal, especially now, right? With prices are so high in some areas where it's like, I don't know how people could possibly get some of these properties to cash flow as a rental. Like it's just insane what some of these properties are going for these days. So again, it all still has to
We
make.
can talk about that another time.
I'll
share with you how we make our properties cash flow.
yeah, that's a whole nother animal, right? But so again, I don't want to. People shouldn't just go blindly into it and just do that. The numbers still have to work. You do have to actually bust out the spreadsheet and have someone like yourself, or like a professional, look through it and that's done it before and say, hey, are these numbers actually realistic? That's critical, right? Because you could really mess yourself up if you actually do it wrong. Because you're not buying a $25 ETF, right? In this case, you're buying a several $100,000 property, probably like $500,000 plus, especially if it's like a multi-unit thing, right? So you're really putting pretty much all your eggs in one basket at that point. So you really want some expertise from someone that's done it, that's not trying to sell you anything. Hope that was a long answer, but I hope that was helpful.
A couple quick shares. I would never advise anyone to do this, but when my wife and I bought the previous house we bought, we were pregnant with our first. We bought a house with a basement apartment. Walk out. We bought it. Put down 5% on it. And then we used all the leftover capital we had to go buy 3 houses.
Good for you. Hey, if you're able to pull it off, that's awesome. But hence, I can't see gray hairs on the screen right now, but
oh yeah, plenty.
But I'm sure you've got more than me after doing something like that.
So we ended up putting down, like including mortgage insurance, we put down less than $40,000.
That's incredible.
And then the house appreciated $600,000.
Nice. That's awesome.
In like 6-7 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And then that's even before the other 3 properties.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So again,
good for you.
Can't advise it to anyone. And then I picked this quote up, not a quote, but on what to say to kids. I picked it up on YouTube. I forget the lady's name, but her in the example where the child suggest buying something that's a bit on the frivolous side, she said, I'm sorry, honey, that's not a financial priority for our household at this moment.
Oh, okay.
Right at this moment. And then you can explain, you can prioritize. I think it sounds a lot better than saying money doesn't grow on trees.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. Especially if it's like the kids asking for like a donut.
Right.
Yeah. Low on the priority list and then low on the health list, health rankings. Yeah. Oh, and then also with the charity, our kids attend all of our charity events.
That's awesome. See, and that's something I think would be awesome from the kids side, right? Is you get them involved in it in some way, or at least attend. And that way you're leading by example, right? Where you don't just think about yourself and, everything is for profit and I'm always just trying to maximize the net worth. Like, you don't want to instill those kinds of values, right? So that's awesome. That's so good that you're doing that. And I think that's going to be, so you can kind of build the relationship with your kids while actually giving back, right? Which is awesome, right? Because you're kind of you're filling both buckets essentially.
Yeah. And for the legacy, if their kids are supposed to be part of your legacy, which for all of us it is, they have a job to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Like this will be part of your job. Like for my kids, it's school, martial arts, charity work. Those are your jobs. There's no question. There's no nothing about it. You have to do these things, right? Or you're getting kicked out. Kornel,
that's awesome though. Incorporate the charity piece. Great.
Thanks so much for doing this. One last time, where can people follow you?
So you can just search Build Wealth Canada in your favorite podcast player, and you'll see my show pop up there. And again, it's where I interview basically top experts in financial planning, investing, taxation, so that you can pretty much learn for that specifically for Canadians. Or you can just go directly to the site, which is buildwealthcanada.ca. And then the other place, like I said, you can get the free tickets to the Canadian Financial Summit, and that's over at buildwealthcanada.ca/summit. And that will automatically take you to that page, and you can sign up. And then as soon as the tickets are ready, I will email them to you, and you'll be all set. And again, it's similar to the podcast. It's best practices from the top financial people in Canada. So I'm sure you'll learn an absolute ton. Again, it's free, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
And I cannot wait for your high school course to come out. Kornel, you.
I'll put that in a pipeline. Sounds good.
Because you have so much free time. Free time. Kornel, again, thanks so much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. This was fun.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/podcast to register for our next class. I publish an episode here every week, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing, register for our next free virtual training class at investortraining.ca/podcast. Again, thanks for listening to the show. Talk to you next week.